Kathy, you ready?
Yes. All right. Hello and good afternoon and good evening. And so for some of you, it's past bedtime. So we will skip right to this. This is meant to be a quick, fast case study so that you have an opportunity to be thinking about how this applies to you. So when you think about a case study or case studies in general, why do we do them? What's the value? And let me just tell you, the chat is available, so you're welcome to type into the chat or ask questions or anything like that along the way as we go. Let me start because I got all excited. I didn't even say hello. My name is Kathy. As most of you know, since I know a lot of you, I'm one of the owners of Next Level Neuro. And our goal with this whole case study series is to start a conversation. Because why do we do case studies? And that was kind of where I was about to jump into. And I wanted to pause and catch you up for just a second about this. The reality, in my opinion, is no matter where you're at in the health field, whether you're a coach, whether you're a trainer, whether you're a chiropractor, whether you're a therapist, a physiotherapist, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, any time you put yourself in a category where you would call yourself a health provider, what you're actually left with is the ability of many around you. They come with expectations, and we go through our education and we go through school. And at no point in our education is there enough time to see enough people that we actually walk away feeling like, yes, I'm ready. I know what I'm doing. And so case studies, in my opinion, give us really the ability to actually practice and see how other people think about the information, see how other people interpret what they're looking at and what they would do with it. From a neurology perspective and an applied neurology perspective, probably one of the things that I think is most important about case studies, and you're going to see this come out a lot in the case studies that we do, we're going to show you how using applied neurology gives you the ability to see how we thought through a process, or whoever the presenter is, how we thought about a problem and what we did about it. But here's the cool thing. When you recognize that when you take an applied neurology model and you overlay it with anything that you do, you have the capacity to come at problems from many different ways, and all of them create success. All right. So a lot of what our goal is with these trainings is to give you an opportunity to think differently, to think about how you would have applied it personally, and hopefully give you options with the information to see how maybe in the future, if you get another back pain client or headache client or rehab client or recovery client, no matter who it is, or if it's yourself, how would you approach it normally and how might you be able to approach it differently? Right. So mostly we're talking about hands-on practice. Overall, I think, as all of you know, hopefully you all know, our approach is applied neurology. How do we take the neurological sciences and overlay that with every bit of personal training, coaching, and health practice that's out there to give a very holistic look to health, like a whole body approach to health? It goes way beyond our individual tools. And it really blossoms into, let's look at this person that's in front of me. And sometimes the person in front of me is me in the mirror, right? But let's look at this person that's in front of me. And how do I look at the whole picture of what they've got going on? Because the reality is we're complex. We're beautifully dynamic. And some of you, I know your education runs deep and the sciences that you're into are really deep. Some of you specialize in like biochemistry. Whew. That's intense, right? But I've got to be able to take the individual in front of me, look at them completely, and go, what do they need right now to get them better? And I just don't think our education, no matter where we go to school or what we study, gives us enough opportunity to do that. So without any further ado, let's start with our first case study today. And this one's athletic training from an athletic perspective. So we took an athlete that had a goal and had a competition coming up, that it was critical that the goal be reached. So that's where we're kind of beginning today. When Matt's done with this case study, I'll tell you which ones we have coming and what we're going to be looking at and how we can do more Q&A to help you succeed more in the future. All right, Matt, go for it.
Cool. Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Great to see familiar faces and new faces. In case you're confused, this is only a 30-minute call. It's not 3 hours. If you saw the social media post yesterday, it said 3 hours of education. That's because we're doing 6 of these case studies that are 30 minutes apiece, and they're spread out over the next few weeks. So we'll tell you more about what's coming up soon. In our share for today, let me dial this in just a little bit. We're working on an athletic performance case where a high-level athlete needed to get better lat activation. Now, that's not really just the entire story on its own. So I wanted to introduce you to Carrie. Carrie's a pro fitness competitor. She's ranked number 3 in the world in her federation. I've known her for several years, but in what is coming up, at the time that we worked with her to do this case, is that she had been training competitively for 2 years and was moving into the pro category on stage. So she began as an amateur, working toward pro at the time that we did this. But she contacted us because she had not been able to hit a bodyweight pull-up after 2 years of training. So she's been working with multiple lifting coaches, personal trainers. She's been getting body work done and still has this gap in her training. And her primary complaint was that when she tries the pull-ups, she gets pain around her right rib cage and just has really poor activation in her lats. So the first thing we roll through is a history, going, okay, what previous injuries are there? What happened before this began to happen? And I just have a highlight reel kind of what came up in the history. So first of all, history of 9th rib fractured on the right side. So that's a major finding when you have rib pain during a pull-up. Right side posterior muscles are typically weaker and smaller than her left side. When she's attempting the pull-up, she can only do about 10% of the range of motion. So she's failing the exercise pretty early in the movement. She has massive back and shoulder tattoos on all down her spine and on the right side. I'll show you more pictures of those in a moment. History of ongoing vestibular issues. So she reports frequent dizziness, occasional vertigo, and sometimes body dissociation or feeling ungrounded. And dissociation for her meant I feel like I'm 6 or 8 inches removed from my physical body. Like I'm out here in space and my body's back here behind me. Okay. So, and I know I'm going fast through this because I've only got 20 minutes, but I want to walk you through our thinking. So if we go back a slide, whoops, let's go back to this. I want you to just pause for 1 second and go, okay, if this were you, where would you start? Would you want to check the rib? Would you want to check range of motion of the rib cage? Sensory information around the tattoo and the soft tissues? Range of motion in the shoulder? Would you dive right into looking at our vestibular system if you have those tools, right? Because there's the old way of thinking where if an athlete's having pain upon movement, I want to go check the site of pain. And then I want to check anything that's functionally related, above or below, front to back, reciprocal inhibition areas. But then in neuro, you have a few other options. So think about where you would start, okay? So what we do in our assessment process is we actually start with a gait assessment. So we can see some neurological patterns that are showing up upon the very first gait assessment with Carrie. Namely that she's presenting with a brainstem pattern on the right side for the PMRF, if you're familiar with that terminology, and a cerebellar pattern on the left side, okay? If you've never done neuro gait assessment before, that's something that we teach in our programs, but it really gives us an insight into what's going on beyond just the biomechanics and joint actions. So we look beyond the structure, beyond the joint movement, and see what's actually contributing to those, okay? So take her through the gait assessment and we find these 2 things, and these are pointing to some like true brain area deficits where the brain's not connecting and integrating with body movement correctly. Really quickly, we wanted to confirm those findings, so we did a few additional cerebellar assessments and some expedient muscle testing, and everything just kind of falls in line. You go, yep, that's the pattern we're working with. So for those of you who have some neuro training, if you know those terminology and those brain areas, that might give you an idea where we're headed. If you don't, stay with me, because we're going to also go through some of the other assessments that you would be expecting, okay? And really quickly here, we kind of change gears. We're like, okay, I watched you walk. That was easy. It took 2 minutes. But now I want to go work and look at the rib, because that's what my athlete is expecting, right? When she comes in with rib pain and inability to do a pull-up, she's not going, oh, I need someone to check my vestibular system. She's expecting someone to look at her ribs and to look at her lats and to see how things are moving and how they're working. So we do a palpation and mobility assessment at the area of pain, truthfully, just to clear it and go, yeah, we're going to make sure there's nothing really going on here. So we check mobility and rotations to the right and left, like a multi-segmental rotation, lateral flexions right and left, anterior posterior glide, and lateral glides, making sure that all the vertebrae and rib attachments are moving correctly. Everything's pretty good. It's moving sufficiently, it's decently controlled, okay? When we palpate at the 9th rib where she had the fracture, it's negative for a pain response, and the tissue feel is healthy. There's no inflammation, no swelling, no redness. It's not tender to the touch. So after checking through that stuff, I'm like, okay, Care, I don't think the rib itself is a major player here. We can move on, right? So then closely related to that rib and that movement is respiration. We have diaphragm attachments that sit just below that 9th rib. We have the movement of the intercostal muscles, the serratus, the QL pulling down on the lower ribs. Like all of this stuff has to be working and moving well. So on first assessment of her breathing, that excursion, the expansion of the rib cage during the inhale was pretty limited on the right side and somewhat painful. So we go, okay, this is our first finding of something that's weird, something that's not going well. So let's see if we can start to address this. So we work on a diaphragm activation drill. We do some rib excursion breathing. We practice forced inhales and forced exhales to target the intercostal muscles. And upon finishing those, things are moving a little better. Like, all right, we're making a little progress here. Next step in the assessment is to check the tattoo. Okay, so this is a picture of Carrie's back from her social media feed. You can see the tattoos we're dealing with. Lots of coverage over the lat, the ribs, the spine, the scapula, the whole shoulder. It's an entire sleeve down her right arm. And the thing about tattoos is that tattoos are scars, right? They can create sensory disruptions. They affect tissue mobility, nerve signaling, sensory awareness, and they can contribute to overall threat that an athlete or client is experiencing. So in a hands-on assessment, we want to find out, is the sensory awareness problematic? And is the tissue mobility a problem around that 9th and 10th rib? When you can see from the bullet point, everything moved well. The dermal layer is moving well, superficial fascia is moving well. We already know we don't have restrictions of mobility on the ribs themselves. So everything has normal sensation, which means there's no outstanding findings. Pretty much everything comes back negative, right? Then we go, okay, well, if we kind of follow an old school train of thought, she comes in, she can't activate her lat, let's do some lat activation, right? We just need to turn that thing on. We need to get it moving better. We need to strengthen it a little bit. So we take her through, or I took her through a lat mapping and activation routine. So we take the muscle from its fully stretched position, which means creating some thoracic flexion, lateral bend away, opening up the shoulder, really kind of stretching out the lat on the right side, and then bringing it back to a fully contracted position. So we're creating some shoulder extension and adduction behind her. We're dropping that shoulder toward the floor, which is thoracic extension and rotation. Picking up the pelvis on that right side. So we're like squishing, shortening the lat, right? So we're going through this mapping, going, let's get it activated and then let's stretch it out and activate it and stretch it out. This is a very, if you never used this type of mapping before, it's a very active muscle activation technique where the client is driving it. which means their brain is really getting involved in providing the neural drive. I'm not doing it for them. It's not passive activation. It's not based on reflexes, but it's voluntary movement on the part of the athlete. So we go through 10 or 12 really good reps of muscle activation. And then when we have her do a gait assessment, going back to that original pattern, her gait assessment improves. Now, the reason that's important is gait. We use that gait as our primary indicator of whether her nervous system is improving from the exercises that we're giving her, and her overall movement is getting more efficient, more fluid, like more controlled, or is the movement degrading, becoming less efficient, more clunky, more loud, more disconnected. Okay, so as her gait improves, what we would expect is improved muscle activation, better force production, better range of motion, greater stability, and better performance. So when the gait gets better, I go, great, that looks awesome. Let's retry the pull-ups. Didn't work. Still failed on the first pull-up. Okay, which was a little surprising to me at the time. I thought we were at a place where we were going to get a better result. So it's like, no. So the important realization at that moment is, okay, we're not just talking about lat activation, right? That's what she was thinking when she came in the door. I have rib pain and I can't activate my lat. Well, we just did activate your lat in a very active way where you were in control, but your brain is still having trouble translating that into the exercise, into the pull-up. So there's got to be something else going on. Okay. So at this point, we're going to move away from old school thinking that's more focused on the body area in pain or having the deficit. We're going to go higher order. Okay, so we move on to higher order neurology. And I chose this picture. Carrie calls this her booty pic, but I chose it because you can see the muscle definition in her back. She's got some muscle there, right? Like, we're not talking about someone who doesn't have developed musculature or hypertrophy. There's some muscle, but she's just having trouble accessing it. So the first place we go in higher order neuro is thinking about that vestibular system. Going, okay, she's got a history of dizziness, body dissociation, some ungrounded feelings, a little bit of vertigo. And what we know about the vestibular system is that it greatly affects posterior muscle activation and reflexive stability, okay, as well as autonomic function. And specifically, when you're changing your level up and down, the saccule, which is one of the otolith organs, is primarily responsible for sensing and then responding to the changes of your body position relative to gravity. So if your saccule is working, you'll be able to do up and down movement easily. That would include squats, lunges, jumping, and pull-ups. If your saccule's not working and you can't tell where you are in space when you're going up and down, your force production is going to be a little worse and your stabilization is going to be a little worse. So knowing this about the saccule and the vestibular system, we proceeded to do some bouncing exercises for saccule activation. Like, let's stimulate it and see if that helps, right? Gait assessment improved. Like, okay, let's try the pull-up again. And wouldn't you know it, she completes one pull-up. She hasn't been able to do this for 2 years. Okay, she's been training with a professional coach. She hasn't been able to hit a pull-up for 2 years. And we hit one after doing vestibular activation. Everybody with me? You following? Okay, so this is pretty cool. To take it one step further, we know that saccule talks directly to the brainstem. And remember, in our original gait pattern, I said we found some brainstem deficits on the right side. So just to lay the foundation here, what the brainstem does is it creates good muscle tone on the ipsilateral side. It creates reflexive stabilization on the ipsilateral side. And it reduces pain. Those are 3 of its 4 responsibilities. Good muscle tone, good reflexive stabilization, reduces pain. Remember, she's struggling with all 3 of those things. And if the vestibular system and that saccule are talking to the brainstem, we should be seeing an improvement in those three. So I'm thinking, let's go directly to the brainstem. Okay, so that's what we do next. Thinking that we might be able to increase tone and that stabilization of the rib cage against the actions of the lat. I'm like, hey, let's try some cranial nerve activation for the right side cranial nerves so we can drive more activation into the brainstem. So after trying 3 or 4 things, here's what we land on. Smelling in the right nostril, which is actually a cortex activation, but it does drive a lot of descending information into the brainstem. That tested really well for her. Bite, that should say biting on the right, not bit on the right. Little typo. Biting on the right side, so biting down with her right molars, activates the masseter, which is driven by cranial nerve 5, the trigeminal nerve. Created some great reassessment. And then putting her tongue in her left cheek, which is going to activate the right side cranial nerve 12. Okay. Each of those assess well to activate that right brainstem. So we're like, okay, let's stack them together. Let's do them all at the same time or in succession to each other. So we go smell, bite, tongue, and then let's see what happens. Okay. So final results from session number 1. Her gait assessment was considerably better with all 3 cranial tools. So we went into the pull-ups. And in that very next reassessment, she pulls 5 body weight pull-ups. 5 in a row. No pause, no stop, no assistance. She pulls 5. Okay, after using those stacking tools. So again, hadn't been able to do a pull-up for 2 years. Not only did we hit 1 pull-up in the first session, this is within a 1-hour training session, she was able to hit 5 in a row. Okay, so here's our homework. I wanted her to include rib cage mobility and diaphragmatic breathing in her warm-up before the training session began. That's making sure that we keep the good mobility and diaphragm action happening that we found was necessary at the beginning of the assessments. Number 2, I want her to perform saccule bouncing immediately prior to any exercise that includes up and down movement. That one's in there because that's the exercise that allowed her to hit her first pull-up. And then finally, I want her to utilize smell on the right, bite on the right, and tongue in her left cheek. And I told her she can mix and match those. I was like, use at least one of them on every exercise that you do, because this is going to make you stronger. It's going to give you a neurological boost for power output, particularly in your pull-up. So use one of those with every exercise you do in the gym in order to improve your output. Okay, so here's the video that she sent me a few days later, just cranking out the pull-ups and looking really good in the gym. Okay, so from 0 pull-ups to 5 pull-ups with a pro athlete in 1 session, primarily from using vestibular tools and cranial nerve activation for the brainstem, not by just working on her ribs and her lats, right? That's Carrie. Okay.
Nice. All right. So I have so many thoughts, and I'm just going to start with this, but let me ask you a few questions first. When you see that, how many of you ever faced a time in your life or had a client or a relative or a friend that it's like they're doing all the right things? Why is their next thing not happening? Why is the next goal they're setting, or the speed, or the pain, or why is it not working? And I mean, 2 years where she had been doing everything right and everything that her coach had her do. And she's an extremely diligent person when it comes to her training. She is intentional and methodical and habitual about it. And she trusts coaches to guide her in that. She doesn't try to do her own coaching. So she's pretty much an ideal client. There's like no 2 ways around that to say that. But what do you do when your tools aren't working? And yet for her in her sport, this is a necessity for her to be able to create the shape and the power and prowess that she's looking for. So what do you do? And it's crazy. Matt, what did you say the top 3 things were that really made the difference in her, or top 4?
The highest priority was the cranial nerve activations, which were going to stimulate that brainstem.
Okay, and which 3 were those? Or what did you do?
Smell on the right nostril, bite with the right molars, tongue in her left cheek.
Yeah.
And then if I put a 4th one on, it would be the vestibular activation of her saccule, the bouncing up and down.
The reason I love this so much is because you're talking about keys that unlocked her performance. She was already doing every single thing to have her body ready to do this, but her brain was like, no, no, just no. And so by finding the right keys to unlock her performance, her body was like, oh, okay, now we can do this. It was less than 3 weeks later that she had done a post that said she had done 26 pull-ups in the gym. A huge difference, right? Because her brain was slowing her down because it didn't believe she was safe. And that's a really big deal. When you're doing all the right stuff and the body's still going, what are the keys that are going to unlock someone's performance? And same thing on top of that, what are the keys that are going to unlock someone's health? So here's my question to you real fast, because we've got like 4 minutes left in our first case study of 3 hours of case studies. So in our 4 minutes that we have left, tell me in the chat or unmute, if you do know neurology, or if you don't, what are some of the things that you were thinking of that you would have wanted to try with her? Would you have watched her walk? Would you have tried massage? What would you have tried personally to see if you could get that type of a result? I would love to kind of see what your thinking is as a professional, because I know a lot of you on this call, and you come from very different backgrounds and very different specialties, but so many of you would have done amazing things to get a result. So I'm kind of curious, what would you have done? So either throw that in the chat or unmute and tell me. And then while you're doing that, one of the things that comes to mind is to let you know, well, I have a question for you, but I'll save that one for a second so you can type. Where we're going from here, the other case studies that we sat down together as a team that we thought could be most helpful. Right now, COVID is happening again, or it's still happening. It's always happening. I don't know, right? It's all I know that is within our team and within our family, we've all been through the most recent bout of COVID. And so we're seeing long COVID symptoms happening again. And so we figured the next most valuable case study that we could do is talk about long COVID recovery. And how do we get from after the virus is done, when it's had that impact on the body, how do we get through that? All right, so we'll take you through a protocol of that. The second thing is the third one that we're doing next week. And these case studies, we're going to do them on Mondays and Thursdays for about 4 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, something like that, some period of time. So we're going to do Mondays and Thursdays for just a half an hour. So it's going to be a quick burst, and you'll be able to see the recordings of them afterwards in case you miss it, or if you want to go back through and track them. The next one that we think is kind of most important to do after athletes' performance, after long COVID recovery, is how do you create business growth? Do we have a case study for business of how do you take applied neurology, put it into your business and grow? Really accelerate you beyond other professionals. And then we're also doing an injury recovery, because how do you take most of our work in the health field is dealing with people that are dealing with injuries or health problems, right? And then we're also doing, what do you do for people when they've had either brain or body trauma?
Hi.
Ooh.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Melissa. So what do you do when someone's had internal, either mental, physical, or psychological trauma in their life? How do we begin to internally recover from the inside out? I love the fact that you guys are chatting and giving us some feedback. Let me ask you one more real quick question before I let you go. I've told you the case studies that we're thinking about doing. Do you have a thought of what type of case study you would like to see? An athlete, an illness, an injury, a recovery? What would be helpful for you as a professional to see as a case study. Because if we have an athlete or client that we have worked with, we're happy to share that information with you. So throw that into the chat. Digestive issues. Yeah, that's a good one. Chronic fatigue. Yep. Perfect. Any others that you think of that post chemo? Yeah, that's a big one. Frozen shoulder. Yep. Neurodegenerative diseases like Parkinson's. Yep. Stiff knees post surgery. Ooh, sleep apnea. That's a good one too. Nice. Yeah, those are good. Okay. So last question. If we go over it in this format and give you a quick 20-minute burst of kind of what our thinking was, and we allow you time to ask questions and get input, is this a good way to go about this? Is this good? Kind of let me know in the chat if this is a good format for you to kind of see it and play it on repeat. Awesome. Hopefully, what you will see from this is if you go back and listen to it, put it on pause and go, okay, wait, what would I have done here? Okay, would I have done that? Okay, now I have a question because I would have never thought to do smell on that side. Why? All right, so hopefully this is going to lead you to ask better questions, to expand your thinking, expand your toolboxes to what you're capable of, and just ask questions so we can create a community of contact and connection. Because neurology's big and it's powerful. And if we can use it and we can use it together, that's pretty awesome. All right, I'm 2 minutes over. I got to stop talking.
You guys take a screenshot real quick. This is the info for the next one. It's on Monday, October 2nd, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. If you want to say hi to Carrie or look her up on Instagram, her handle's here at the bottom. You can also follow us at Next Level Neuro, but grab a screenshot of that before you go.
All right, y'all. Thank you for your time. Hopefully we will see you all on Monday, and please feel free to invite friends if this would be helpful for them as well. All right. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everybody.
Take
Have a
care.
great day.
Bye.